show on the road. It is 7 o'clock. I will start by calling the roll. Twyla Jones.
Here.
David Albright.
Here.
Doug Detweiler. Russell Sipin here. Dean Martin.
Here.
Drew Ramito.
Here.
Genevieve Spira.
Here.
Jay Magnus.
Here.
Kim Monachino.
Here.
All right. Have we had time to go over the minutes, and was there any amendments, additions, corrections, questions? Did we want to try and go through the highlighted areas and assign responsibility? Starting on March 3rd, I was not here March 3rd, so there was a motion to accept the minutes. It was moved by Mr. Martin. Does anybody remember who seconded it?
It was a male voice.
It was a male voice.
Yeah, it's 3 weeks ago.
Well, we will put a question, we're on March 3rd. Put a question mark there. What about going down further in audience participation under discussion? There was a male voice that had a question for the law director regarding lines of secession. He indicated.
That was me, Russ.
Okay. So that was Mr. Romito.
Okay, and in that last paragraph on the first page, where it says, our charter reads, the vice mayor is president of council. Is that correct? I don't remember that our charter says the vice mayor is president of council, because
Mr. Maestros, that was something, that, at least it appears that you may have said that. Do you have the minutes in front of you? Would you like me to read it?
Which minutes are, which day are you looking?
We're on March 3rd,
Okay.
The first page.
and we are at the bottom of the first page.
Looks like I just have March 10th with me, the minutes.
The bottom of the page there.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, we don't use the term vice mayor. We have a president of council who succeeds the mayor, well, sits in for the mayor as the acting mayor if the mayor is absent.
So you were basically just saying that those could be interchangeable terms, but not necessarily that our charter says we have a vice mayor.
We don't have, I mean, we don't use the
Right.
term vice mayor, correct? But
Okay.
Who is the mayor, and the mayor, absence of the mayor is the president of council.
Okay.
In a temporary manner, and then also there's some language as it relates to a permanent vacancy in the mayor.
Is that okay? Is that clear, Jenny?
yes. And also the first bullet point on the second page, in the last sentence where it says Walter Drain, our codifying agent, it's actually Walter Drake.
Drain.
Isn't it? It is Drain?
Drain, D-R-A-I-N, that's correct.
It is Drain. I
It
thought
is.
it was Walter Drake.
Nope,
Nope. Oh, I have to go back to some of my old notes.
Walter Drain.
Okay.
So the next highlighted portion of this is under old business on page 2, bullet point. Male voice commented that no other charters that he reviewed had specific language like ours with regards to section 3.07, meetings of council, that said regular meetings would be scheduled like ours the second and fourth Tuesday of each month.
That was me, Russell.
Okay, that was Mr. Ramito. Move to the next bullet point on page 2 of the March 3rd minutes. Discussion between female voice, Mayor Prokop and Mr. Maestros regarding the current language with the boards and commissions in section 7. Mr. Maestros also indicated that commission is listed twice under 701, general provisions. He discussed what specifically Parks and Rec Board and changing the date of the appointment of the teen representative. Anybody claim responsibility? No question mark there. Review of section 7A, male voice reads the following. Who read 7A?
I think Doug did.
Doug? Doug Detweiler? We'll go on to page 3, second bullet point, further discussion from female voice asking if Mr. Maestros would put something together that provides more clarity in reviewing the language and how to interpret that language within the next 2 weeks. Mr. Maestros indicated that he would.
That would be Jenny.
Jenny, thank you. Page 3, next bullet point, under section 801, male voice. Mr. Maestros and a female voice and Mayor Prokop discussed the advantages and disadvantages of a primary election and the general election, i.e. the costs involved, the turnout of voters, and the time frame from the primary. Can anybody?
Yeah, the male voice was mine.
So the male voice was Drew Romito
Female voice was Jenny Spira.
and Jenny. Thank you. And Article 10, first bullet point, male voice asked Mr. Maestros for clarification regarding the 3 ways to place something on the ballot. Drew?
I thought it was Dave.
Dave?
You did.
Oh.
The one time it's not Dave.
Yeah.
Article 9, Charter Review, actually, Section 1101, Charter Review Commission. A male voice commented that further discussion should be needed regarding whether or not the mayor should have some appointments to a commission.
That was me again, Russ.
Drew? And the last page, the adjournment. Who made the motion to adjourn at 7:40? I don't know if it's that.
I think it was me.
Could have been Dean?
Yep.
And seconded by somebody. All right, March 10th.
Could I make one more comment on March
Absolutely.
3rd? Back to the first page, under audience participation, the last bullet point under Pete Metropolis, where it says, he advised us that addressing specifics in the charter should be removed. I believe what he said was addressing specific things in the, it should be avoided, getting too specific in the charter.
Hey, Russ.
I think he gave something written about
Yes.
not addressing a specific issue in the charter. I don't think I commented that on the 10th.
This was on the 3rd, March 3rd.
Oh, maybe it was on March 3rd. But there was a written.
I
document that
just
you-
question the way it's worded in the minutes, if that was your intention to state.
Pete, what it says is addressing specific provisions in the charter should be removed.
items that address specific issues in the charter should be removed. So like a specific issue would be saying Tuesdays and on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays, that's your council meeting. All right? What I was thinking is that that's too specific. Council should have some leeway as to choose when their council meetings are. That's the kind of thing I was talking about
Okay.
when I wrote that. Trying to think if there's anything else. Nothing that comes to mind right now.
Okay.
But I just wanted to make the point that don't address a specific issue for one time in the charter. You know, that should be, there's other processes for that, whether it's a referendum petition or council passing an ordinance, sending their own meeting nights, whatever.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Metropolis, for
I do
clarification.
more stuff to give you, so I just said.
I did not see any highlights in the March 10th minutes. Did anybody notice anything that was missing? I did not.
Anything.
Are we good? Then I'd like to make a motion to accept the March 3rd, 2014 minutes as amended and accept the March 10th, 2014 minutes as presented. Do I have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Twyla Jones. I will call the roll. Twyla Jones,
Yes.
Dave Albright,
Yes.
Russell Sipin, yes. Dean Martin,
Yes.
Drew Ramito,
Yes.
Genevieve Spira,
Yes.
Jay Magnus,
Yes.
and Kimberly Monachino.
Yes.
All right, the minutes are approved. On to our audience participation. You get to go again.
Pete Metropolis, 9044 Gettysburg Drive, Twinsburg, Ohio. Been observing your meetings for a while, and some points were raised in the last couple of meetings. One was the appointment by the mayor of council of boards and commission members. I have a written comment for that. My belief is that boards and commissions are advisory boards to city council, and they're more policy making, whereas the mayor has the department heads and she's more administrative. Nothing's exclusive, but that's my opinion. The appointment of boards and commission members should remain with council. There was also discussion about form of government change from strong mayor to city manager, or back and forth. I just wanted to pass along the point is that no form of government is going to guarantee you a good form of government. I mean, you could have bad mayors, you can have bad city managers. There's one city here that changed from a mayor to a city manager and back to a mayor because they wanted to end corruption, and none of it worked. So a form of government is no guarantee that you're going to get good government. The last point I have written here for you is there's some discussion about removing people from civil service. The classified civil service. The last ballot issue that I remember, there were 4 positions that were going to be removed from civil service, and they were all bundled as one ballot issue. Well, for a person like me who goes and looks at the ballot, I say, well, these 2 people should remain, or these 2 positions should remain in civil service, and these 2 should not be. If you're going to remove people from classified civil service, I'd ask that if I have 4 people that are 4 positions that are going to be removed, I said I should have 4 ballot issues. They should all be bundled as one. And one other thing that just came up tonight, we were talking about the primary for the mayor. City that I used to work for, they didn't have a primary, but if they had a 3-way race and nobody got 50%, they had a runoff election of mayor later, a month later. There's additional cost for that. People have to go out and campaign in November and December, but that might be an option rather than just doing away with the primary or keeping the primary. I'd like to pass this out to you, and thank you much.
Thank you.
Russ? Hey, Russ, can we comment?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you pass this to Gary? Gary, can you give this to Shannon? Drew?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. First of all, I think your idea about, how some cities do a runoff if nobody gets 50% is a really good idea. Because I think we've already discussed the primary and some of the concerns we have of having a May primary and then having really almost 6, 7 months where you could have a lame duck mayor.
Right.
So I think that's a really good idea that we should just look into more. I don't know if Mr. Maestro says if that's something that you want us to do, look at communities that have it that way and bring it back, or if that's something that you can easily access. or not maybe easily access, but access it.
I could pretty easily access that and get some language as far as the cities that do that. I'm sure Mr. Metropolis will give me the city he's referring to, and then I can pull some other ones and as far as how they treat that. I mean, it is interesting, because you had mentioned, Mr. Romito, doing it almost beforehand, narrowing it, and if you had 51%, then there'd be no need for the November election. This
Right.
is almost treating it the other way, which would create a December election, I guess, would be the first week of December, which is an interesting way
Yeah.
of handling it.
And I just think that one way or the other, since you know, it's 6 or 7 months, that maybe we can give people an option on the ballot, and maybe they'll say, hey, you know what, we don't want to have the primary that way. But somehow, for us as a group to come out with an alternative that might help that situation of a lame duck mayor.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Could be that, and it was also brought up last meeting, I believe they have the primary in September.
yeah.
Right. Russ, I was going to ask, as a point of order here, are we now discussing the issues?
Well, I don't think there's any more audience, so let's
Okay,
just roll
so-
with this. And, you know, the
so
one thing
this
I'll
is
say,
gonna
that
be our first-
charter review meetings have always been about talking and going back
Okay,
and
well,
forth.
no,
so-
I'm just saying, I didn't know if Drew was responding just to what, but it sounds like now we're straying into actually discussing that
Go right ahead.
particular issue. So that will be our first issue to discuss then?
Absolutely,
Okay.
since we're on it.
The other comment I wanted to make, and again, I would just want to make comments. Mr. Metropolis took the time to write all this up.
Yep.
And so while we're here, you know, I wanted to be able to address it. I guess the question I have for you is your recommendation, you talked about boards and commissions and that council should make those. Are you then opposed to the mayor having input on those? So it would be the city council and the mayor wouldn't have any input on the boards and commissions? Is that what you're saying? I just want to make sure I got it. So, is that clear? No, you may have, I'll take fault. I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because you know, you come here to these meetings and you give input, you know, and I just want to make sure that I got what you're saying.
Okay, what I'm saying is that the mayor is going to have input. What I'm saying is that the mayor is not going to have an appointment.
Okay, no appointment. What about a vote or you know, should the mayor be there for the interviews and the voting, or you just think that it should be separated, that it would be boards and commissions, with city council the way we do it now? You want it to stay the same?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Just want to make sure. Okay.
Okay, you can change it if you want. I mean,
No, I just wanted to get where you're
nothing
coming from.
says I'm right.
Yeah.
And I believe currently the mayor does have the opportunity to sit in on the interviews and make comments and so that is, she does have that ability already to be involved, but the problem is that she does not have a vote.
Yeah, you know, and I don't know how much involvement you can have if you don't have a vote.
Well, it changes from council to council too, depending on
Yeah.
council you have sitting there, if they want you in there or not.
I wouldn't want to go to the polls and to say, you can have some input, but you can't vote. I wouldn't like that too much when it came election time. We'll hear what you have to say, but you can't vote.
So were those more like recommendations then you make? Did she make recommendations?
Mayor,
Can't
how do you do it now?
Really, I have not sat in on any of the interviews in a long time. Kind of got out of that practice 4 or 5 years ago, and I've just continued it then. But before that, I did sit in and I was part of the discussion.
That's all I had, Russ.
Okay. Let's go back to the mayoral primary. Jenny, I believe you had something you wanted to offer up at that,
Well, yeah, if we're going to discuss that, I think one of the options we discussed last time, now, my feeling is the May primary is really far away from the November elections. And that does put a lot of pressure on anybody or the 2 people who might come out of the primary. It's no problem if we don't have more than 2 people running, but if we have 3 or 4 people running and your incumbent should not make it at the primary, that does give them a very broad period. I mean, I like the idea of moving the primary to September because then you have a much closer time period where somebody's not spending 9 months of their year campaigning. I don't know that the idea of having a runoff is really that good. It does bring up the fact that you are going to have somebody campaigning in bad weather. And also, as we're currently set up, I believe the new mayor takes office when? In December?
December 1st, yes.
So if you have a runoff after the November election, how do you have time for that before our charter imposed date for the new mayor to take office is reached?
So does anybody here have anything negative to say about moving the primary? Can anybody think of a problem that could occur if the primary were recommended to be moved from May to September?
It's a good idea. You do think it's a good idea?
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree with Jay.
That was Jay, and
Yeah, Jay.
Dean agrees. Just helping you out, Shannon. I mean, I honestly don't see any problem with it either, you know. So we're looking at a runoff or a primary, and at least the way I see it in my eyes is a primary gets everything accomplished on time. And the election takes place on election day, and that is it. We eliminate that period of time. We cut down quite a few months of where you could have a lame duck mayor. So I think, when does the notification for somebody, when do you have to register to throw your hat in the ring, I should say, to be?
75 days before?
Well, we have it in our code section, in our charter, but it is 75 days.
Prior to the election or prior to the
Wait a minute.
primary?
Well, prior to the primary,
Prior to the primary.
first of all, the May primary, because that's the way we have it set up.
Wait, it's 90 days.
I'm sorry, 90 days
90
prior
days.
to the election, the primary election. So that puts us into, February. Pull your petitions and have them filed and certified by the board.
So if it were moved to September, will we still keep it 90 days prior to the September primary election? And
Well, yeah, yes, probably. And, I mean, it creates, not that it's a problem, but it would force the hand. I mean, quite often you have candidates for mayor coming from council, and they would have to choose, are they running for the council seat, or are they running for the mayor's seat? Whereas the way it's set up now is they can technically file for the primary. If they don't come out as the first two, if they're third in that, they can still file for their council seat. Because the timing of the dates are different for council versus mayor without that primary. So the one thing, I mean, if you had it 90 days, it puts you into June to file for mayor. And then, and that's just the way, I mean, we could set that up the same way. I mean, there are September elections, so it's not unheard of.
so does it add to the difficulty of somebody on council making a decision of which office to run for, or
Well, forces their hand.
it forces their
They have to make
hand,
a
right?
decision.
I'm not sure it's a bad thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's,
So
That's one
refresh
change.
my memory, the mayoral primary, you guys have to 90-day notification before September. When does council have to notify?
90
but
90 before
November.
November election.
before the November.
yeah, I'm sorry, it is 70.
In fact, if you remember, a few years ago, Mr. Fury
That's the mayor.
took out a petition
75th
prior to
day
the
before
90
primary.
days and went out
Must
and
have
got
an old-
signatures, and his
Oh.
signatures were
That's-
declared invalid because he did it too early. So we have that time limit in there.
Oh, you really have a window.
But from what I understand, we're the only ones that have that, because the people down at Summit County said, this is the craziest thing.
If you're running for the
So you have to declare it 90 days and then get a petition together to
Other
turn in at 75? Is that what that?
No, That's
So
under
what
the signatures, I think.
But what is this, the third paragraph?
Yeah, this is Dave Albright and Gary.
The first
Got it.
paragraph says, 8.01 says, filed with the Board of Elections at 90 days prior to, such and such. But then the last paragraph of
Right.
8.01 says, not later than 4 PM of the 75th day, so which,
Yeah,
what's
One
the
is
window?
when you can pull it out, and the other is when you have to have it in.
Okay.
but if I could, the first paragraph, if you read, nominations for elective office other than office of the mayor, okay, shall be 90. If it's for the mayor,
Yep.
then it's 75 days prior to the primary election, which is the last paragraph of the way it
Those
currently
different-
reads.
Yeah, elections, yeah.
So the mayor's 75.
So would the way around this be to give less time between the primary and the main election, but maybe go into August? Because then they'd have the 90-day filing before the November election. If the race for mayor, the primary for mayor was held the first week of August, they'd be able to meet that 90-day window.
Yes, and we can set it up. I mean, if it's the commission's desire to move it to August or September, then we can establish whether it's a 75-day or a 90-day filing deadline. I mean, we can establish that by charter. So, I think if you make the decision, first of all, when you want to do it, then we can talk about the pros and cons of 75 versus 90 days. The reality of it is, there's not a huge difference between those two, as far as filing. I mean, it's really 25 signatures will get you on the ballot.
But the 75 days, if we had a September primary, the 75 days still wouldn't get you, you wouldn't
No.
have 75
You s-
days.
Right.
So whether it's 75 or 90, if it was September, it wouldn't make any difference.
Doesn't make any
Right.
difference. You still have to file for one position or the other.
Right.
So the only way around that would be to go to an early August.
Well, I still think that you would have to make the decision if you're deciding to run, if you're a council person, you're deciding to run for your council seat or mayor, you'd still have to make a decision and select.
Right.
You couldn't do what you could do now, which is run in the primary, and if you don't finish in the top two, you can still run for your council seat. That's the only thing you could not do if we moved it back to August or September. And like I said, I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just that's currently one of the issues with the council people that do run for mayor. They know, if it's a three-way race going into the primary and they're all three council people, one person can still run for council.
I still like September.
Well, I do
I'm
too.
afraid in August, you're going to get a lot of people out of town on
Exactly.
vacation. Not that they couldn't
Schools
vote.
aren't even open.
Yeah, once school's back, then you're gonna get more
Right.
people in town,
Yeah, and the buildings will be
Yeah.
So what would be the next step here? I like the idea of September, David, and we'd continue to work something into the legislation that says, you know what, if we only have 2 people that have filed to run for mayor, we don't even need
There's
the
no-
primary.
Which
We
it
can
already
bypass
says
It's
that.
already in here, yeah. This
Right.
would be one word change from May to September.
Right.
Right,
in
that's
a
all.
Section 801 and leave the rest alone.
I don't know if we want to bring this to a vote, if that's one proposal we do want to get on
But,
there. I mean, it
and
sounds
that's
like we've
another
all made up our
question.
mind.
I have too. Do we need, before we do a final vote on our recommendations, do we have to advertise to the public what we're looking at and offer them an open forum to address
This is the
that?
open forum
This
right
is the-
now?
So we don't have to say, the Charter Review Commission is looking at these items and are looking for public input.
No, it's not an advertised, here's what we're thinking.
Okay.
The media is more than welcome to be here
Okay.
if they wanted to be, but.
I just know in the past, I've seen things in the paper talking about the Civil Service Commission, and they're going to be looking at this and this and this, so that people are aware of the the things, but, I mean, if that's not something we want to do, that's fine.
That
I just-
was, if I remember correctly, that was after decisions had been made and sent forward. Then
Okay.
it became an article in the paper. But as was mentioned, the media has been invited, and I've talked about it at every council meeting, inviting residents, if nothing else, to give us input. I know everybody doesn't watch them, but we've tried to get people here.
So how is that done then? So we will decide what we are going to recommend,
Correct?
and at that point, we forward that to council,
Correct?
and then if it's in the paper, then people would come and address council
They could.
when they're,
Mhm.
okay, just,
Mr. Sipin?
Yes, Mr. Maestros.
Just if I could, I mean, I think it brings up a good question. That is the process, okay? And the process being, I mean, this commission makes recommendations and sends 5, 6, whatever the number is on to council as far as changes, and it'll be, you are approving, for example, I sent you some language, draft language, on some sections we'll discuss tonight. If ultimately you agree on that, your next meeting, you'll have final language presented, and you'll essentially sign off and approve that that is an item or a section you're sending to council. That will be incorporated into legislation that will go to council, a resolution with ballot language to place it on the ballot. And that will be the action that you are taking, sending on to council, and then council will read that and have it on their agenda for discussion to ultimately send it to the Board of Elections with your ballot, with your exact language on it that you send to them, unless council by a supermajority votes against it.
So, Russ, that being said then, for this September, do you think it makes sense that Mr. Maestros would draft up the language for this?
I
and
was
then-
just gonna get ready to make that request. I don't know, do you want, as a charter review commission, to have a vote on yay or nay whether or not we even forward something to Mr. Maestros? And then we would vote on so I believe that we would probably want to have a vote right now on the charter review's recommendation to receive legislation from Mr. Maestros regarding changing the date of the primary from May to September. So I will make such motion,
I'll second it.
seconded by Drew. I will call the roll. Twyla Jones?
Yes.
David Albright?
Yes.
Russell Sipin, yes. Dean Martin?
Yes.
Drew Ramito?
Yes.
Jenny Spira?
yes,
Jay Magnus?
Yes.
Kim Monachino?
yes.
All right, it is unanimous.
That would be 8-0,
That would be
because someone is absent.
correct.
That's right.
I would like to move on to some of the proposed legislation that came attached to our minutes.
Should, wherever we have.
And Mr. Maestros, did you want to lead off with what you had given us on section 4.04, vacancy in the office of mayor?
Certainly. And Metropolis, I have an extra copy here if you want a copy of this. Brought by, I know how many are being used, but I don't know if there's plenty available out there, so. Okay, as you can see, at 4.04, vacancy in office of mayor, what I did here, attempted to do here is clarify a couple of the issues that I recognize, and I think this commission recognized, that were a little deficient. And that being, what happens if the president of council is unable or unwilling to accept the appointment or the step up to be the mayor. And what we included here is the president, and then the next alternative being the vice president of council. And then if neither of them accept, then it would go to a vote of all council members, all 7 of them, which I think is a deficiency we currently have. Other than that, I didn't change any of the language, and I did briefly talk today with the mayor about, and just to bring to your attention, as you can see, there's a reference to 6 months, okay? If the unexpired term is not in excess of 6 months. Many of, and that's old charter language, you'll see in a lot of the old charters that haven't really been tweaked over the years. What you start to see in more of the newer ones is language that if it's less than 2 years, because every 2 years is a municipal election. Odd-numbered years are the municipal elections. And what you'll have, somebody will sit as an acting mayor until the next municipal election, which will always be in November of the odd-numbered year, rather than the 6 months, which almost always will result in a special election having to be called. If for some reason there's a vacancy in the mayor, unless it happens between May and November, you're going to have a special election with that 6-month language in there. If you have the within 2-year language in there, or at the next municipal election language in there, you'll always have a November 2013, 2015, 2017 election coming up. So that's the only other, I'll throw that out there for consideration. It prevents that almost always needed special election.
So, could it be possible that the reason somebody out there selected 6 months was because if you actually have somebody who, say it's the vice president of council, who says, okay, I am comfortable doing this for 6 months, but I don't want, what's the longest that they could end up having to act as mayor if we change the language to 2 years? Would it be
Well, if you change it to the next municipal election, it could be 23 months, 29 days.
Right.
I mean, the day after an election, if you did it, it would be just a day under 2 years.
Does anybody have any, I don't see any reason to tweak the 6 months thing. Shannon doesn't see you all shaking your heads, but.
No,
with
I
the-
agree with you, Russ. I think
Yeah.
the 6 months makes sense.
So then you would have to have a special election.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I believe the
Probably
6,
happens so infrequently.
Right.
Yeah.
right.
Right, hopefully.
Right.
But with the 6 months, number one, a person would be going into the mayor position who was actually not elected by the people, and maybe the people would not have elected if that person had run. So, yes, you need somebody in there for the interim to keep things running, but then it should go to the people so they have the opportunity to decide. I mean, that person could run for the position, and then the people would have the ability to decide, yes, this is a person we want to run. But just appointing somebody, which could be anyone from council, I mean, yes, they're elected, but they were only elected by one ward, well, except in council at large. But I think it's better to keep the 6 months in there.
Okay, I agree. Thanks, Jenny. One question, what happens if the vice president doesn't want to serve, the president doesn't want to serve, the vice president doesn't want to serve, and they elect Joe Smith, who doesn't want to serve? But what happens if there's literally nobody on council that wants to serve as mayor?
Well, the hope is, and I've been in these meetings where you have council gets together to elect one of their members, and you hope that somebody expresses their desire to want it, or 2 people, and they make their case, so to speak. You know, I'd like to be mayor for the following reason, and they make it to the other council members, and there's people that want to do it as compared to, I mean, if the vote starts happening, Joe Smith and Joe says, listen, I'm not going to accept it. I don't want to do it. I mean, it wouldn't make sense that the majority of them would pick that person. So, I mean, the hope is you get somebody that's on there.
But I think his question was, what if no one wants to serve? Does somebody get forced into serving
Well,
through the election, or should there be another further tier down?
yeah, I mean, to go another tier down, you'd be going away from council then. You'd be going away from all elected officials. You'd be going into, department heads, something like that. I mean,
I think the likelihood of nobody wanting to serve, I think your chances are better win the lottery than that nobody's going to want to serve, because I think most councils, everybody wants to be mayor.
Well, I don't know. It's a big responsibility to be mayor. I mean, that's a
Yeah, it is, but I think.
5, 6, 7 day week job sometimes, and council,
Right.
God love them, but you can hold down another job while you're a council person.
Right.
Yeah.
See, and that is where the problem comes in.
Right.
Because someone who has a full-time job, and if all 7 council people have a full-time job, no one may have the time to devote to it.
Which is good to keep only the 6-month limit in it.
Right.
If you
Right.
got-
I
If
agree.
you got stuck
Have
for
an
2 years, I mean, maybe you could
Right.
make do for 6
Yeah.
months,
Right.
but 2 years.
Right. And I was looking, and I've looked at it both ways, or the other way, does that inspire somebody? Well, at least I have it for 2 years, and then,
Yeah.
you know, you don't know.
Yeah.
I was going to use a term here that I probably shouldn't say, but, so it's,
I mean, some of the language that you'll see in charters and other charters that has a 6-month provision, with a full-time mayor, there'll be a provision in this that if a council member, the president or the vice president of council takes over, that for that 6-month period, that the mayor's office shall not be considered a full-time position in order to allow them, because more than likely, they're gonna run in the election, but they don't have to quit their job or get into this position to work at a full-time position for something that might only be 6 months. So the charter will have language in there that says, while the person is the acting mayor, the position will not be considered a full-time position for that 6-month
and
period.
that probably should be in there.
Okay.
And that's something that probably would entice somebody to not say no.
And if I understand this wording correctly, they would only serve for the unexpired term if there was not more than 6 months. But that doesn't mean they would have to serve for 6 months. If it was more than 6 months, in 2 months, you could have a special election. replace the
You
mayor.
certainly could,
There's
and then,
nothing-
and what
right.
you're doing is, yeah, you would be running for the unexpired term
Mhm.
if it's in excess of of 6 months. If there's 2 years left on the term, you're running for, you run for those 2 years, and 2 years you have to run again.
Right.
It creates, that double election, but
So do we need to go back to the point that was made over here? Do we want to incorporate language in here that says, in the event that something like this happens, the office of the mayor is not considered a full-time position, or?
I think if we keep it the 6 months, it would be something to seriously consider, because I think that would make it much more likely that one of the 2 council people, vice president or president, would accept it. It becomes difficult to accept it if you don't know, where you stand, if you're gonna have to run in a couple months and you have a full-time job.
Are we in agreement of incorporating that language into what Mr. Maestros has presented?
So stating in the language that it would not, the person serving that time would not have to be here full-time? They could.
Correct.
Okay.
So,
I guess I'd have to see how it was worded.
yeah,
Right.
something to the effect that the interim,
The acting mayor.
right, the acting mayor, while fulfilling the interim term, would not be full-time.
Because my concern is, like we just said, I don't think the mayor's hours are set in the charter, but we're talking a 40-hour-a-week job, at
Right.
least. And we could be in a position where every council person has a full-time job.
Right, but I would be wondering, when you're talking about part-time, would they give 8 hours a week, or would they give 20 hours a week? That leaves a lot of interpretation to the individual person.
It seems like once you start getting into this and toying with, it's not a full-time job if you're the interim, then what are
Okay.
what are the part-time guidelines?
What are the parameters?
Right. If you could take it, but, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, noon to 3, what do you do? And then it seems
I
like.
could show up on the 1st and the 15th and pick my paycheck up.
Right, it's kind of micromanaging it then, it almost seems.
Okay.
Yeah,
How's
but-
everyone else feel about that?
I just want to add one comment. I think this is the mayor's position, so I think whoever takes it, it's got to fulfill the duties, no matter whether it's part-time or full-time. So we're getting into the micromanaging of time now. So it's, completing the job as the mayor. So I think, the language. the
Right,
6
so
months, I think, is
basically,
fine.
whoever, if it's president of council, they have to fulfill the duties of the position, make sure that everything's taken care of that needs to be taken care of. They could possibly delegate some things through that. Being acting mayor, they could delegate to certain heads of departments some of the things that a full-time mayor might do to maybe allow them a little more latitude. But yeah, it gets maybe back to micromanaging again, like going, where do we go if nobody on, I mean, you know, we've already got it set up, president of council, vice president of council, or one
An
of the
elected
council
member,
members.
right.
You know, you can, how far do you take the line of succession before you take it too far and it gets too difficult to work with? And the same thing, whoever is the acting mayor is going to have to determine when they take it if that's something they can work with. Because, you know, talking about part-time, that opens up another can of worms. What is part-time? And how do you make sure that they are putting enough time in to adequately cover the duties of the mayor?
Okay. So, would we like to have a vote on receiving ballot language, or the proposed legislation for this? I think
would.
we should. I think we're in agreement on this.
Yes.
What, I mean, David's already, Mr. Maestros has already submitted proposed language.
So this would be the final,
Is this,
If that's what you agree, then this item 4.04, I can convert into legislation, bring it back to you.
Right.
For approval of the final language, which won't be the red line, it'll just be final language.
right. So that's what I
so
was
would
asking
anybody
for.
then, you know, have, is there anything on this ballot, this language that's on the proposal that anybody would disagree with or want changed?
Does this mean then that you're gonna forego the other thing about part-time, full-time?
I think so.
Okay. I was just curious, okay.
No, I think so. So I don't think anybody else has any tweaks to add to this. So I will make a motion that we request from David the final legislation that would be voted upon by council for us to review and have one last vote on it. Any seconds?
I'll second. Jenny
Thank
seconds.
you, Jenny. Call the roll. Twyla Jones.
Yes.
Dave Albright.
Yes.
Russ Sipin, yes. Dean Martin.
Yes.
Drew Ramito.
Yes.
Jenny Spira. Jay Magnus. Did you
Oh,
say?
yes, sorry.
Jay Magnus.
Yes.
And Kimberly Monachino.
Yes.
All right, unanimously passed, 8-0. All right, section 4.05, powers of mayor. This was clearing up the mayor's the director of public safety issue that did not seem very clear in there, so from what I'm seeing here, we're just inserting a paragraph, the mayor shall serve as the director of public safety for the city, and he, she shall serve in the capacity unless and until the mayor appoints another individual to serve as the safety director.
Yeah, I just want to point one other thing that this clarification could potentially help out with. I've seen where other cities, it says the mayor shall appoint the safety director. There's no reference to who is the safety director, and they appoint themselves and then also want the salary as a safety director, which, you know, some ordinances have that. So I think this potentially gets rid of that if you say the mayor is the safety director, unless he or she designates somebody.
Good, nice.
Yes.
It does do that, too. The only other change, I'm sorry, I missed in the third paragraph, I see, just striking out the director of public safety, the director of public service, and so we're just inserting, let's read that paragraph. Subject to provisions of the civil service regulations and the provisions of this charter, the mayor shall have the power to appoint, promote, discipline, transfer, reduce, or remove any employee of the city except A, those required by this charter to be elected, and B, those whose terms of office may be fixed by this charter. All appointive officers shall serve at the pleasure of the mayor. Members of all commissions shall serve at the pleasure of the council. Any input on that? Any conversation?
I think the wording that was put together here does a good job of capturing what we wanted it to say and clarify it without any, I don't see any needed changes on here.
So shall we have a vote to accept this and request the final legislation from Mr. Maestros? So I'll make a move that we do accept it and request it.
I'll second.
Seconded by Dean. I will call the roll. Twyla Jones.
Yes.
Dave Albright.
Yes.
Russ Sipin, yes. Dean Martin.
Yes.
Drew Ramito.
Yes.
Jenny Spira.
Yes.
Jay Magnus.
Yes.
And Kim Monachino.
Yes.
All right, that is passed, 8-0. All right, we're on a roll. Let's take a look at 7A01. David, would you like to just clarify what has been changed here before we actually read over it? And
Yes, thank you. And again, 7A01, I view this as an extremely important section of our charter. I mean, I don't want to say it's more important than others, but quite frankly, it's generated the most litigation over the years. And I can tell you what the intent of 7A01 is, which is basically that any change in this city, okay, in the city of Twinsburg, if there's going to be a change in zoning to any piece of property, or a change in the uses that are allowed on any piece of property, it has to go on the ballot. That was the intent. And I believe that that's the way 7A01 was originally drafted to read, okay? That if at any point in time somebody wants to come in and have a piece of property rezoned from industrial to commercial, they have to put it on the ballot. If they want to come in and have slaughterhouse on their property and it's not permitted and they want to add that as a use, they have to put it on the ballot, okay? We as residents here know what our property is zoned and know what our neighbor's property is zoned, and we should have a say if that's going to be changed. Where this has gotten away from us, in my opinion, is that it has been read that when the language as it is right now talks about any change in zoning classifications, okay? What we are having, people have read that as any change in, okay? Not from C1 to C2 or R to industrial, any change. Any change in the width of parking stalls, any change in what we require the thickness of sidewalks to be, any change in the color of fire hydrants, any change has to be on the ballot. And I think that that's an inaccurate way of reading what 7A01 was intended. So what I have attempted to do here is define zoning classifications, that being residential, commercial, industrial. Defining those subclassifications, that being R1, R2, C1, C2, I1, etc. And then specifically stating that in each of those zoning classifications, the cities shall designate specific uses that are permitted and prohibited, and we have that currently in our code. Each section has that. So now that we've defined it, that any change in any of those classifications or subclassifications of any parcel or parcels in the city, or in the uses permitted or prohibited in any of those classifications, shall first go to Planning Commission, shall second go to Council for approval, and shall third be approved by the majority of all voters in the city and by the majority of voters in the ward in which the property is located. Because sometimes we'll have one property owner will come and say, I just want to have my property rezoned, and it could pass citywide, but that ward could be opposed to it. So, you know, what it says is it has to be a majority in that ward and citywide. Some of the changes will affect citywide, so it won't really matter. It won't be ward specific, but that's what I have attempted to do in 7A01 without getting it too cumbersome. I'm not sure if that's how you read it when you read that, but I wanted to give you a little background of why it's a problem, and hopefully that we can clear it up.
So the subclassifications, could you just run over, like, how many subclassifications do we have? And just in a nutshell, your elevator speech, what's the difference between an R1 and an R2?
Density.
Pardon?
Really density, I mean, we have, 20 subclassifications, okay?
Okay.
And really what we're talking about, I mean, C1, C2, C3, the intensity of the use as it relates to maybe an interchange business district versus a district that's located in residential, what can be, located there. Industrial, we have I1, I2,
I3.
heavy industrial. And then when you get into the residential, okay, we're talking about density. And we're talking about from large lots all the way to apartments. So really, and that's a key. We want to have that any change in density would have to go on the ballot. Okay, any change from an R1 to an R7, for example. That couldn't happen unless everybody has an opportunity to vote on it.
So, and I agree with that. So the difference between an I1 and an I2 is not density, it's something else.
It's use, and what we try to separate is the intensity of the use, maybe how many vehicles are being generated, the noise, any dust that might be caused by that industrial use, from heavy industrial to light industrial. That's how our industry is subcategorized.
And commercial, like what's the difference between a C1 and a C2, and is there a C3?
There is.
Yeah.
C1 is local, so that'd be your dry cleaners, pizza shops, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think we define it as things that a normal individual might use on a weekly basis.
Within a neighborhood.
Within a neighborhood, bakeries, pizza shops, things like that, up to the interchange business district, where you have, I believe, fast food is allowed or carry-out's allowed, maybe with conditional use, and you have, that's where you have Gander Mountain down there. I mean, that's the C3 district. Town Center is located in C3, and then you get out to Lake Masaras, that's bordered by residential. Masaras is
Which would be community commercial. C5 is mixed residential business district, like around the square.
Oh, okay.
So that would be a C5 district, residence and commercial.
So if we were going to change, what this legislation, with what you're proposing to change, if somebody still wanted to change something from a C1 to a C5, that has to go on the ballot.
Absolutely.
And it has to be approved by the majority of people in that ward as well, not just the majority of the city.
Right.
Of the
Correct.
residents. Okay.
But it doesn't have to go. Council could deny it.
Well, they could.
And
If generally,
only
the
request-
property owner must first go to the planning commission for a report and recommendation. If they approve it, they send it to council. Council can override planning, or planning can say no, and then council could still agree to put it on the ballot if they override planning.
Or
But-
council could say it's not going to the ballot, and then which it falls to the property owner to do it by referendum.
Right.
Okay. And you were talking about changes within zoning classifications, like red or green fire hydrants.
What we have,
Changes like that, or thickness of concrete, that goes, council can do that,
correct.
right? That does not have to go to a vote. Just tweaking such things within the different classifications is something that can be done on a routine basis by council.
Correct. And in each of those 20 categories that the mayor read, in our code, we have permitted and prohibited uses for each of those. Designated A through Z or AA, whatever it might be. We list them all out of what is a permitted use or a prohibited use in each of those districts. So if somebody wanted to change it or put something there, it might fit, but we have to put it on the ballot because it's a new permitted use. And we've had those over the years. I mean, we have done that. I think doggy day, or not the doggy daycare, actually, the rain barrels was a new permitted use that we had, that we put on the ballot last year or the year before. They went through that procedure. But at least this would let everybody have a say-so on what is going on, basically on your neighbor's property and within your city.
But
What-
you also feel that the wording you have submitted here will help clarify and avoid some of the issues the city's faced in the past.
I do. And because like I said, in our code, which is, a couple hundred pages, we have how many copies an applicant must submit to the building department for consideration for planning commission, what size of paper it must be on, and what size font they have to use. And when you talk about that everything in there has to go on the ballot, that becomes so cumbersome to us. And while those are extremes that everybody would sit here and say, well, of course, that doesn't have to go on the ballot. And of course, a change in zoning does. There are those middle issues, and one of those middle issues, in my opinion, is the height. Okay, I mean, and that's what we're currently in litigation is, building height. Does building height have to go on? And that's, we discussed it with the Charter Review Oversight Committee a year or so ago. And I could see somebody making the argument that if you're talking about in the mixed-use district, that building height is relevant, because if mixed use, you're allowed commercial and residential. If we allow them to go 2 or 3 stories, you could have more units.
Right.
That's why we limited it to just industrial, which industry, you're not talking about density. You're only talking about what you're doing inside that building. And, my opinion was at that point, building height isn't changing. What could be permitted inside there is not changing the zoning. If it's a warehouse, you can just stack pallets 10 feet higher than you could before. That was the point, as compared to having to put building height on the ballot. It ties the city's hands as far as some flexibility in order to make these changes as these things change. I mean, the industry we were dealing with simply was coming to us saying, everybody needs these buildings with these interior cranes, and 35 feet doesn't give us the space to do that. So we made that change, and now, we're entering year 2 of litigation on that. And my hope is that, yes, that this would clarify that this is what has to go on the ballot. And I'm trying to be specific, and if anybody sees any gray area, let me know, and we'll make it more clear, because that's certainly my goal. My reading of this is clearly that we are not taking away any voting rights of anybody. I want to make that clear.
I agree. So here's what I would like to do with this, and I'm still of the mindset, Mayor and Mr. Maestros, that I am I'm going to be very cautious about anything with 7A01 while there's this pending litigation. That's just my opinion. It's one person's opinion, and that's it. Do you think that if this were passed, that the judge in the current litigation would look at this and go, well, yeah, now this makes it crystal clear. Building height in an industrial area is not something that should be voted on? Or do you see this changing the potential outcome for your litigation? I guess is my
I don't, because I think the way the court will look at it is that in that point in time, at that snapshot, when the city took that action with the ordinance, which was in 2009, to change it to building height, what did the code read at that time? And that's how the court's going to review it. If the court agrees with us, then it won't matter if this change is made. If the court disagrees with us and says, well, that should have been on the ballot, what that means is that ordinance increasing building height is not effective, and then we could wait and see if this passes. If this passes, we could do it again or react accordingly. Just to make it clear, I sent a copy of this to legal counsel for Mrs. Gaydash, a copy of the 7A01 proposal. Simply to say, hey, just want to give you a heads up. We're not looking to trick you or anything else. Here's what we're considering. Because quite honestly, Mrs. Gaydash's attorney and I really don't disagree on this issue. we don't. I think he would agree with me that, yeah, that says what we all thought it should say, and now it's
Right.
clear. So I sent it to him, not as an offer to settle the litigation, but just, hey, here's what Charter Review, I sent to them, and here's what they're discussing tonight, so. I haven't heard back, but
Then let's do this, and I will say that when I was on Charter Review Oversight Committee, myself, Jeff Johnson, I don't know if Lisa Turner was at that meeting, but we did read over the original 7A01 and how it related to the litigation, and we said we really didn't see that as an issue. So nobody from Charter Review Oversight Committee brought up any, you better watch out on this one type of deals, which was our charge during the past couple of years to do. So let's sleep on this. Let's table it. I'm not going to sleep on it. Let's look it over. Let's see if Mr. Mendenhall has any type of response or anything. But I like this, and I think it does definitely clarify things.
Hey, Russ, what about making a motion to have this put together, to final legal, just like we did with the others? Make that motion, have them bring it to us. In fact, I'll make that motion that Mr. Machos does that.
Okay.
That he puts together like he did the others, and then we can vote on it after that.
I am okay with that. So the motion's been made by Mr. Romito to request the final legislation on 7A01 as he has amended it. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Give it to Kim, I've already got it.
Seconded by Kim. I will call the roll. Twyla Jones.
Yes.
Dave Albright.
Yes.
Russ Sipin, yes. Dean Martin.
Yes.
Drew Romito.
Yes.
Jenny Spira.
Yes.
Jay Magnus.
Yes.
Kim Monachino.
Yes.
Passed unanimously, 8-0. Kim, are you prepared to run over what you had put together for 7.12? And
Sure.
I think after this, unless we can continue down the agenda, but I think as far as old business / new business, which this is in a way, I think we could maybe figure out what we're going to do at our next meeting. And
Sounds good. I thought maybe just to have some discussion around this section. This was the Department of Parks and Recreation. Our current language is just the brief statement: the Department of Parks and Recreation shall administer and promote the City of Twinsburg public parks and recreation facilities and shall provide for the added enjoyment of life through recreation. We all agreed that that was a nice statement to have in the charter, and is it something that we wanted to expand upon? So I started to look at a couple different charters and started to look at the flow of the language in our charter, and I thought about a couple different areas that I'd like your input and suggestions on. A section possibly that talks about appointment. The Department of Parks and Recreation shall consist of a Director of Parks and Recreation. And then I just had a few questions as to how is the Director of Parks and Recreation approved, and what is the process for that? And then possibly another section of duties, just a brief statement talking a little bit about the Director of Parks and Recreation shall have knowledge of municipal park and recreation operations, budgetary and supervision skills. And then the last part, just a section on the organization of the Parks and Recreation Board. And I mirrored this section from our charter, and I left a couple blanks for discussion as to how we could see this in the charter if this is something we would like to consider. The Parks and Recreation Board shall consist of 5 electors, 1 member from each of the 5 wards to be appointed by the council. The appointments to the board shall be for a term of blank years, and I'm not sure of the years. A vacancy occurring during the time of any member of the Parks of Recreation Boards shall be filled for the unexpired term in the manner authorized in the original appointment. No member shall hold any other city office.
I think 3 years is the majority of our
That's what I thought.
commissions.
Yeah. So just some thoughts on maybe expanding that section a little bit more and talking a little bit more about the actual director, their duties, and then the board, if that's something that the commission would like to see. If not, we do have our current language that we continue with.
No, I think I think we need to expand a little more on it.
I agree.
And, you know, bringing up this organization of the Parks and Recreation Board, Mr. Maestros,
I'm sorry.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
As I'm going through this, Article 7, Administrative Departments, Commissions, and Boards. You know, one thing we're looking at is, under general provisions, there's different language and different references on the various board and commission descriptions. That I was trying to look at something general. And in doing this, I noticed we have the list here. The city shall have the following commissions, boards. We're eliminating already and commissions. Some of these commissions and boards are addressed in the charter, like the Civil Service, City Planning, Board of Zoning. Those are covered in Article 7. We have nothing on Parks and Recreation or capital improvement or architectural. The Districting Commission is addressed in Section 3. The Charter Review Commission is addressed in Article 11. Shouldn't all these boards and commissions be under Article 7? Especially if we're having general provisions that cover all commissions and boards, it seems to me that we should address the makeup and these general provisions all in the same place.
It's an excellent point, because
sure
of the ones that you mentioned aren't in the charter, we have them in our code. Department of Parks and Rec, or the Parks and Rec Commission, Community Relations Board, Charter Review Oversight Committee, Civil Service Committee, Board of Zoning, Building Code Appeals. We have those in our code, in 137, 141, 143, 144. I mean, so some of them, for whatever reason, were left out of the chart, and I don't know if it was a
Well, I know
timing
when
as
the
they
charter
came.
was originally written, there was no capital improvement.
Correct. Correct. So these were added, but the language was not added. And then you do have, I mean, you're correct, the Charter Review, or the Charter Review Commission is in the section which deals with amendments to the charter, and I think to a certain extent that's probably an appropriate place to have it, but the Redistricting Commission, believe me, when we put together a list for council to make these appointments that we talked about earlier, I mean, I had to create a chart for council of who they have to be as far as the members, because some talk about property owners, some talk about an elected or a certified elector, some talk about a resident. I mean, they all have different qualifications for members of different boards, too. They're all not the same for some reason.
That's why when you try to come up with, encapsulate what the requirements are, and each one seems to have different language. Another thing that I couldn't find, in general provisions, I couldn't find anything that addressed the manner of filling any vacancies which would occur during the term of any board or commission member. Is
Yeah,
that it?
it's covered. In the 701, you have the paragraph that talks about the city shall invite eligible persons to apply for available appointments. It's after the list, it's the 1, 2, 3rd paragraph under the list, 1 through 9. That last sentence, advertising notices for other than full-time appointments shall appear at least 30 days prior to the making of such appointment. So the way we have it treated that is,
Okay.
Okay.
it's a nebulous way, but that's the only sentence
Right,
in
yeah,
there.
I was looking for something that said, in the event of a vacancy of a, and
Right. Yeah,
I can
so-
see where that, okay.
So that's how we've treated it. When we have a vacancy, we post it for 30 days rather than the twice for 60 days.
So what's covering it is other than full-term appointments.
Right.
Okay.
So did we want to invite who is the director of Parks and Rec right now?
It's Derek Schroeder.
Derek Schroeder.
And I did have a conversation with him. I had emailed him back and forth and sent him some of the pieces we'd worked on. He was comfortable with the current language. I mean, I do think maybe we could do an invite if he would like to.
If he would like to,
Okay.
would you invite
I
him,
would be
please?
happy to invite him, yes.
Okay. So he was happy with the current
Yeah.
mission statement?
Yeah, he was, and I smiled.
Okay.
Okay.
As
So-
far as inviting people too, one of the things we were looking at was the request to look at the summer vacation schedule for council. And Amy had requested that if we are going to address that she could come to our meeting to speak on that. I believe the mayor had mentioned that. So if we are going to look at that, possibly we could invite Amy also.
Please, do so.
Okay, you want me to?
Please.
Okay.
Okay, was there anything else that we wanted to speak about regarding 712, or any of the issues we've already covered?
I'm just curious, under the appointment piece, how the director is appointed to, or how is it,
How is a director appointed?
and what is the process?
The mayor appoints all directors of each department.
Yeah, that would go back to what we're looking at under powers of the mayor in section 4.05, where it says all appointed officers shall serve at the pleasure of the mayor.
Right, okay. And what is the process? They just,
I don't believe there's any set process. You know, I've always advertised and interviewed, but I
Right.
was.
just like applying for a job?
Right,
You-
exactly.
Okay. Well, I do think we've touched on some new business, definitely, but was there anything else that anyone was prepared to address today? And while I'm thinking about, what is our deadline again, Gary? When do we have to have everything finalized and
By what, middle of June?
To get it read 3 times, middle of June, so we can have 1, 2.
We have 2 meetings in June for legislation and 1 in July.
Okay.
And because August, it's 120 days for issues, isn't it? Or it's less days for issues.
It's less days
Less
for issues, so it's,
So
We
I'm
have
gonna
to-
say
we have
we
to have it
probably
done
wanna
by
have
the
things
month.
right,
Yeah.
just to play it safe by the end of May.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, 75 issues, 90 for candidates, 70.
Also from our minutes from the last meeting, I have notes here on the section on the civil service. Mr. Maestros was going to reword the section for our review on including both of the
Competitive and non-competitive groups, and just kinda clean that up.
Right, right. And that we haven't had yet, so we
Okay.
still need to look at that. And I believe we also need some rewording to address the electronic publication of advertising for bids and,
And so we looked at section 6.03, halfway down, about 2 weeks in a newspaper of general circulation within the city. And we talked about that, Mr. Maestros. I'm not sure if you were here.
Yeah, we did, and for some reason, I prepared that. I'm guessing it didn't get to you. What I did was created, and if I could just briefly, it's one small paragraph, section 12.04 I created, which is use of electronic notification. And this reads as, for any provision of this charter that requires notification to be posted in a newspaper of general circulation, said requirement shall be satisfied by posting or electronically advertising such information on the recognized city website and/or any other electronic medium generally recognized as an industry source for such information. Because we have multiple references to
Right.
posting, and rather than change them all, I put the catch-all in our general provisions. And Mr. Slade, I'll give you a copy. This was sent out, and I can forward it to everybody. I'm not sure how it didn't get included in the... Oh, we can make copies, too, if you want. We can get copies before you leave. Thanks, Gary. And then, maybe you can take, it's just that one paragraph, you can take a look, maybe we can discuss that, and that can be one I can finalize too, coming forward next week.
Okay.
Or, next meeting.
So by doing that, adding section 12.04, we've eliminated, what was it, maybe 2 or 3 references
Yes.
to?
Yeah. And it still provides for that, but it gives us an alternative method of doing it. Rather than just eliminating the newspapers, it just gives us electronic use also.
Right, so, and we were never really talking about eliminating anything.
Right.
An addition.
Were we still, does that replace, is there any rule that says certain things have to be posted in public places, X amount of public places?
Yes.
And does this, would electronic media then replace one of those? Like, could
It
you
wouldn't
say, okay, we
replace-
don't have to post it at Giant Eagle anymore, we can?
Right, what we have done with that was, councilmatically has already, we had 5 places in the city that had to be posted, legislation and agendas, and those things had to be posted. And what we've done is required them to be posted here in City Hall and also on the city website. We no longer post them at Giant Eagle or the post office, because what we found is when we go to post it, we tear down the old one that nobody ever looked at, and it wasn't serving its purpose, especially in this day and age. So we've already changed that through
Okay.
council. But this would bring it a little more in line with, the revised code has gone this direction. They've allowed electronic posting and some of the ORC language. For cities that don't have charters that are governed by the ORC, some of these provisions have already been made, so it just gives us that ability.
I find it's interesting. I always received notifications for postings from PUCO in hard copy, and now I get all of them via email. I haven't gotten any other than electronically in probably 2 years.
So do we want to look over 1204 this evening and?
Yeah, Gary's going to pass it out. You can take a look at it. It's pretty short. If it's something you can look at and kick around right now.
Thank you.
But you haven't done the Civil Service Commission on the
I have not,
classified-
no. I will get that for you at your next meeting.
So for section 12.04, it reads, as Mr. Maestro said, use of electronic notification for any provision of this charter that requires notification to be posted in a newspaper of general circulation. Said requirement shall be satisfied by posting or electronically advertising such information on the recognized city website and/or any other electronic medium generally recognized as an industry source for such information. So, here's my question. Would 1204 basically allow, not that you want to do this, but could the argument be made that you could do it, that if there was a commission being put together, say charter review, that you could, if you wanted to, not advertise it in the Twinsburg Bulletin and just go online and?
Yes, it would. That is one of the provisions for notice of boards and commissions.
Does say and/or.
If anything, that would be probably the only thing that I might object to is the and/or. I would like to see and, but not or.
I tend to agree with Jenny on that one.
That, at least at this point in time,
Right.
maybe another 10 years,
that's going to be a moot point.
Right, and
But-
I don't think that's anybody's intention to not put it in the bulletin or in the paper, but,
Or,
you know, I just don't want that left open
Then we can do
so
it
that it could happen 3 years from now or
have
whatever.
it in the paper. We can
Yeah.
always put it
Perhaps-
electronically.
Yeah, very good point.
I mean, if it's in, then we're not really changing anything because we post things
Right.
now on the website. I mean, we put that information. So we're not required to, but we do it. So if it's gonna be and, then we're still gonna have to put it in newspapers and the cost and the timing is not gonna change. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna change it to and, I don't see the use for it.
that's true.
I mean, from a legal standpoint, anyway.
So I think let's make this something that we are prepared to look at more closer at the next meeting, because I want to go back and read
Yeah.
the two or three or whatever references that notification is required.
I have a question.
Jenny?
What would be the point or the accomplishment of of only doing electronic, of not doing the publications? What is the benefit?
Well, the benefit is somewhat twofold. One, the cost. I'm not sure the cost of the bulletin, but I know we've had to post these in the Akron Beacon Journal and/or the Plain Dealer, and it runs into the thousands of dollars just to run it in there. And second is the timing of it. The bulletin, we are 10 days ahead to get it in the paper, and what we have found is, delicately putting this, no fault of the bulletin, we have sent it to the bulletin, and with the understanding it's going to be in there, the timing for the public hearing, and it doesn't get in the paper, and they apologize, and they put it in the next week, and then we are not in compliance with our charter at that point in time.
Right.
And we've had items specifically from the 2009 Charter Review Commission. For those of you who noticed, in 2009 and 2011, we had the exact same issues on the ballot. And the reason for that is because it was discovered that the newspaper publication in '09 was off by a couple days because of the timing of when it got in the paper, and therefore we had to put everything back on the ballot again in 2011. That's the real issue.
they publish once and not twice.
Yeah, and they publish, and when we have requirements to publish it twice, 2 consecutive weeks, not
Right,
more
and
than...
I think they only
And they
published
published
it
it
once.
Right,
Right.
that was the problem. It was published once, and it didn't get in the second time. And recently, within the last 6 months, we've had a posting, well, for appointments to boards and commissions. They didn't get it in on the day it was supposed to be in, so we had to, everything was delayed a full 30 days because it's 2 publications 30 days apart, so we had to push everything back, which put us in a situation, we were scrambling around during the holidays trying to get people to apply for boards and commissions to get them appointed.
So electronic posting, we have control over it.
So,
I think that having the and/or makes sense to have it on a ballot and let people decide. I mean, maybe they'll say that's fine. But I don't see why we would just do anything if it's just gonna be an and. So if we're gonna do anything, it should say and/or and let the people decide, you know, to put it to the ballot and maybe they'll say, you know, makes sense. Saves money, it's more efficient for the city. Maybe they'll say, no, I wanna see it in the paper.
You know, and then the city can react as necessary. If we find that we're not getting any responses via the newspaper to our postings, well, then maybe it is just all electronically. I'll tell you, for the kids for part-time and for seasonal, that's where they go, is they go to the website. They're not going to the bulletin. Now, in my age group, I won't say anybody else's, but in my age group, probably people do turn to the bulletin to look for.
I was just going to say that. I do that too. So I agree there.
Me being younger, I look at it electronically.
Are you
Of-
excluding anybody,
this
though?
board, how many people applied because they saw the written? I did.
Well, the
Where
first
did
couple times I did, absolutely, because I saw it in the paper.
But now you know what to look for.
Now I know what to look for, and I'm on somebody's email list, so.
Right.
Okay.
But I think that having you know, and I can understand for requesting bids and everything, I mean, there's contractors that
Oh,
go to
they know where to
specific
go.
websites,
They-
they know where to go. But for something like this, that's why I think I wanna give this a little bit more,
But what I'm saying is, I think the city can react appropriately if it says "or," because if we're not getting responses from the bulletin, or, you know, then we go electronic.
Okay.
If we're not getting it electronically, then we have to get our responses, no matter which way we do it.
You know, I'm reading this thing here, and I don't see that, or why we're hung up on and/or. The way that this addition
Or.
reads, it says, "For any provision of this charter that requires notification to be posted in a newspaper of general circulation, said requirement shall be satisfied by posting or electronically advertising such information." The and/or, and right away, this is saying that posting it online replaces the need to use the newspaper, right? We
Well,
don't
it
even get down to
could.
the and/or.
It's
But
an
it says,
or. It shall be-
shall be satisfied by posting
Or
or,
It's an or.
electronically advertising.
yeah.
The posting would be paper or either
No, right, it's
electronic.
an or, as far as I mean, posting or
so
electronic.
that point was made by David, and Twyla is kicking in here. Now, what was your question?
No, I was saying, it's saying both. Posting in the paper or
Or-
electronically.
No, it says though, no, any notification that's supposed to be posted in the paper shall be satisfied by posting or electronically advertising such an, you know, so this isn't saying.
Such information
Yeah.
on the recognized city website.
Period.
And or.
But when you,
Yeah.
but when you take a look at the efficiency of all this and going back to, what was stated earlier, when the newspaper messes up and maybe you realize that first thing in the morning, if you're able to turn around and satisfy that advertising need almost immediately by posting
Bingo.
it online,
Yeah,
now we're not pushing things back 30 days.
Right.
We're able
Right.
to still satisfy what it is that we need to do per the charter. And to the mayor's point, they need bodies, so they'll do whatever means necessary to advertise to get the right response.
yeah, and this says that would satisfy that, clause.
Right.
Because it said, yeah, so,
That's true.
so I don't see the and/or, I guess I keep coming back to,
Or is fine.
this says it replaces.
It's an or. You can either post it or electronically.
Right.
Yeah, it's an or.
So, let's,
This
let's
is the big change.
Right.
go
It's a
one-
really
one
big
more
one.
s-
There you're doing, you have to do both.
Correct.
wait, you have to, right back, what did I miss here now? Because I was talking, sorry.
No, we agreed that the "or" meets our objective for what we're looking at.
So, when we have our proposed charter amendments that will be going on the ballot eventually, if this were in place and this was 5 years down the road, would those amendments have to be published in the newspaper twice still? Would that affect this at all? Or is this saying we can effectively remove that publishing? Oh, I don't know if I'm cool with that. So,
Hitting everyone if you remove it from the paper. Are you notifying everyone?
well, I think the paper is probably some people's main source of information, not everyone's. But when it comes to things like, you know, appointments to boards and commissions, okay, you can make the argument that we want people that are online and doing things like that, but for charter amendments, do we want to not have to have those published in the newspaper?
Are you-
I don't think that we do yet.
Yeah.
I don't think we're there yet.
Well, I think what'll happen, though, the commission will vote, and we'll decide if we move it forward, right? And then it'll go to council, and then, see, I'm not opposed to moving it forward, to letting council look at it, and then let the voters decide. Instead
Right,
of
let the voters
instead of me
decide, but-
saying no.
But anything that is, but any change, any amendments to the charter right now, have
Right.
to be published 2 consecutive weeks, just like David, that is a problem that happened back in 2009, when it didn't happen in 2 consecutive weeks. But that is some people's only source of information as to at least prepare you for what the charter amendments are gonna be. So I'm not prepared to, if this were put in front of me today, right now, and I were asked to make a decision, I would say no. Right.
Mr. Slavin,
I would like to-
if I could just clarify one issue, that our charter does not provide for notification of charter amendments
Okay.
in the paper, okay? That provision comes from the ORC, okay? And I just want to clarify that
Oh, so that wouldn't change?
that wouldn't change unless the state legislature changes it as it relates to the ORC posting. But that's governed by the revised code, okay? The changes in the charter be posted for 2 consecutive.
Okay.
Okay, our charter doesn't cover that. Ultimately, what happens pursuant to our legislative act is that we post legislation that council is considering in our 2 areas, and actually, I'll correct it, it's here, and then I think it's at the library, are the 2 places we currently post the actual legislation that council's considering and/or passing. So it's not in our charter, so that wouldn't change that. It's revised
Okay,
code.
so that's just, that's required. So when I asked if that would change, that would not change.
That would not change.
Oh,
It's,
okay.
unless the ORC changed in the since 2011, and I
Well,
don't
that's
believe
up
it
to
has.
them, so.
Right.
Okay.
And I have to confess, I read everything online. I really don't go to the newspaper for that. I might go to the ads in the newspaper, but, everything is really pretty much done online.
I can't argue with that,
Yeah.
because that's what you do, but I still look at the paper.
Right. And for instance, boards and commissions, some people maybe aren't thinking about being on a board or commission. They're not going to go to the city.
Well,
website.
hopefully they would read an article in the bulletin that's being written, that a reporter would say, hey, we're looking, city council's looking to appoint board and commission members, and information's on the website. I mean,
But we
they
don't
do
always
write, I think people would go to an article in the newspaper before they would ever go to the legal ads.
You're right. You're right. But you don't often get those articles in the news, at least not in the bulletin, that say currently, usually where I have seen it in the bulletin is in the advertising section or the classifieds.
Right, in the legal notices section.
Right. I don't usually see the bulletin, and the bulletin is publishing less and less all the
Well,
time.
and it goes back to, we would have to react appropriately then. If we're not getting responses, then we'd have to advertise, whichever way.
So, let's look into this deeper. I say that this is tabled for the next meeting. I would like the opportunity to do a little reconnaissance, just going into the charter and looking at each section and see, because I am much more comfortable after what Mr. Maestro said regarding that, but I just want to make sure that, I don't want anybody left out there feeling that something's been taken, a source of information has been taken away from them.
I agree.
Okay? Are there any additional audience comments at this time?
I have something else, Russ, because.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because we're having Mr. Maestros put these things together, and we've kicked the can on a few different things. Most of them, we kicked the can again tonight, so we're good. But the one, just to have something put in writing on the boards and commissions appointments, okay? So we can have it to look at and have a vote on it and finally decide, because we've talked about it at quite a few meetings, and that is, the mayor gave us something that was dated April 17th, 2009. I know they discussed it 5 years ago. I read all those minutes. There's listed, 15 communities or however, that mayor appoints all the people. We had Mr. Metropolis talk about it tonight, so I mean, it's an issue we've talked about a lot.
Right.
So now I think what we need to do is have something formalized, and I don't know, Mayor, if this is something we want to discuss with council, Mr. Maestro wants to put together some sort of plan where the mayor would have some input, so then we can finally put it to bed. We can have a vote and decide what we want to do.
Do you want to work on some language? Dave and I will work on some language and present it, and you can,
Thank you.
as you said, kick the can and see what you
Yeah.
like it or not.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Russell.
No, I think that's, I'm glad you got to that, because we have kicked that down many a road. Is there any other new business anyone would like to bring up at this point in time tonight? Are there any additional audience comments? You do. State your name and address. Well, not your address.
Absolutely.
So, Ted Yates, live on Darien Lane. You guys are doing a great job. The last issue, your discussion regarding the advertising, I understand your reservation. I think we've kind of lived through this. Some of the things that, when we're moving forward into this digital world, I mean, the city is also looking at digital signage out front. We've got the now Parks and Rec sign. We have Blackboard that can send out. We could send out to every resident that signed up. This is what we're looking for commission members, different things. So think about, don't just get boxed into website and this. We have, every day we're expanding how we digitally and electronically communicate with our residents. So it's something that the mayor's really an advocate for. Council seems to be proactive in doing that. You know, with the issues with the CIC, we're looking at a new website for that and a way for the community to interact with what's going on with the potential redevelopment downtown. So, you know, so when you guys think about this, I know it's tabled, but think about, you know, all the different mediums that we have now. I mean, within, you know, an hour, we can get a message out to everyone in the city that signed up that says trash is not going to be here tomorrow, it's going to be the next day. So, you know, the same thing can happen if we're
Put
not
me on
getting-
that list.
If we're not getting the results we want, and anyone can sign up for this. So I mean, if we're not getting the results we want, you know, electronically, we can always fall back on the paper. But I think even though there's some resistance out there, I think everything is just we're being bombarded with different ways to communicate with the residents, and you know, we are exploring those. So I guess I just wanted to point that out.
No,
That's a good
I
point.
thank you, Mr. Yates, and I do respect that, but you are talking to somebody who still uses a Franklin planner.
They have electronic planners now.
You know what? I use both.
You know, but to your point, Mr. Yates, you know, when they move the garbage date, I get a text and I get a phone call.
You can get
In
an
fact,
email,
I have,
text,
yeah,
phone
and I get an email. So, and I have 2 lines at home, an office
I
line,
gotta
home line
sign
and
up
office
for
line. So what happens is, my phone dings twice, and then it dings again for the email and the text, and then I get both phones ringing in the house. So I get 6, I gotta get off of some of those lines. But I mean, you talk about getting a lot of communication, and you know, and it's instant. That's
Right.
great.
And I think that's great because you like to be communicated with via that that method, and I do too. No, and I absolutely love
Pony
that
Express
stuff.
comes to
Our
your house.
seniors love it. I have a question. Is everybody here signed up for our electronic newsletter? Do you get it
I get the
every month?
newsletter, yeah.
I do too.
All right, well, if you're not signed up for the electronic newsletter, give me your email address. We'll make sure you get on the list. And if you go to our website, mytwinsburg.com, you can sign up for Twinsburg Connect, so you can get all the messages
Yeah.
on road closures and anything else, leaf pickups.
And Russell, you can sign up for Pony Express on there.
Thank you. Thank you, Drew. All right. I believe that's it for audience comments now. Any miscellaneous? I have one miscellaneous point. From a meeting, 2 or 3 meetings ago, at least one that I was at, I had missed that one meeting, Lauren Sangstock had brought up a point where he said that, and to piggyback on what was discussed about the legislation that the Charter Review Commission presented in 2009, that was put on a ballot, was voted upon and passed, but was not official because of the mix-up at the Twinsburg Bulletin, and that the identical legislation was put on in 2012. And it was. He had indicated that he looked at the legislation that was available online that was, I believe, 1/20/2009, which is something the Charter Review Commission had presented, where one of the 3 ways that an amendment can get on the charter is if the Charter Review recommended it, that it would be mandated that council would put this on. And that caused a lot of rift amongst some council members. That legislation was defeated. by council. They did come back then, and council was allowed to place ballots back, or charter amendments on the ballot themselves. They came back, you know, that said very similar language, but added their own, unless rejected by 5 members of council. So he seemed to think that he wasn't aware that maybe that happened, because he was questioning how did the ballot language change from the legislation that was brought forth, and I just wanted to clarify that's how it happened. It is all straight up. There was no shenanigans or anything going
Yeah,
on.
I thought what he was referencing, that was part of the 2009 problem with the posting dates, that we had to resubmit to the voters.
Which it was resubmitted, and the ballot language was identical to the ballot language that was on in
Oh,
2009. Because I did go on to
Okay.
the the Summit County Board of Electors, Board of Elections, and dug up the ballot from 2009, and it was
And
the
it was
exact, it
identical.
was the same one,
Okay,
absolutely.
so we don't need to address that.
What leads you astray is if you just look at 1/20/2009 and read the language there, and you see the proposed legislation, but you have to go a few meetings then forward to see how it was voted upon, where it was defeated, and then how it was replaced then a month later, I think. So it's all in the up and up.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that. And I did it for my own edification, because I'll admit I don't remember what happened in 2009 exactly, so I was calling Jeff
You had
Johnson.
electronic planner.
Which I did, I did go on to the city's website.
I'm only kidding you, Russ.
I'd like to set the next meeting date.
I have a
Oh, I'm sorry, miscellaneous.
I had a question, I think it was from Ginny Spear, about Article 6, Section 601, limitation on rate of taxation. We talked about the 7 charter mills that we have in our charter. And I was saying that statewide, there's 10 mills, but we have limited ours to 7. And that was sort of my inadequate explanation, so I have a better explanation, which that is what it is. It's from the Summit County Fiscal Office, Dennis Killinger, and I'll read it to you just so you can have a good clarification of it. The 10 mil limit provided by state law, ORC 5705.02, is the aggregate amount of taxes that may be levied on taxable real property without voter approval. This means that each overlapping taxing authority may levy a portion of the 10 mil limit on a given parcel of taxable property up to its maximum share. Twinsburg City Charter would prevail over the 10 mil limit when determining the total amount of inside millage that can be levied by legislation and without voter approval. According to the wording of Article 6, Section 601 that you sent to me, this is from Karen, and your statement that the city has imposed a cap of 7 inside mills, my opinion is that the city of Twinsburg can levy a total of 7 inside unvoted mills. This conclusion accepts the city's portion of the 10 mil limit as included in the 7 mills total. So that's the official explanation.
Thank you.
But what bothers me here?
Does anyone else have any other miscellaneous things they'd like to bring up? No? Do we want to set the next meeting? Do we want to meet a week from today, or do we? I'd like to finish this up by May, and I think we're making progress, so I don't know if we need to meet next week or if we can go 2 weeks.
I think I saw something, I'm not sure if it was the minutes from last week or the previous meeting, that said thereafter the meetings will be held on the first and third Monday of every month.
Oh, I'm fine with that.
So that means
I
we
think we
would be
should check
coming
with
back.
Mr. Maestros and his.
That would be
availability.
great if you make it the first and third Monday, which would be next week technically, but.
Yep,
And
that's
then
good.
We'd
I'm
have
gonna
the
be at the
7th and the 21st.
The 7th and the 21st, let's set both of them for the month of April then.
And if we're good, we'll be done on the 21st. Or wishful thinking.
We'll be close.
Russ, I'm going to be out of town on the 7th, but
Okay,
just so you're aware.
thank you, Kim. So we will have charter review 7 o'clock on the 7th, charter review 7 o'clock on the 21st.
Yes.
Would you like Derek on the 7th or the 21st?
I will leave that up to
When he's available.
whenever he is available.
Okay.
Same with the
Same with Amy.
person you're going to invite, yes.
Okay.
All right, we are good. Is there anything else come before the charter review? I ask before we close. And I will make a move that we adjourn the meeting at, what time is it? 8:50.
There's room.
I will second that.
Seconded by Dean. I will call the roll. Twyla Jones.
Yes.
Dave Albright.
Yes.
Russ Sipin, yes. Dean Martin.
Yes.
Drew Romito.
Yes.
Jenny Spira.
Yes.
Jay Magnus.
Yes.
Kim Monachino.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.